Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Patrons video today that I'm making for Dinnerhe as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen from an act named Ethel Cain off of the Preacher's Daughter album titled Strangers. Now I have actually listened to a bit of this music from Ethel and it's pretty intense stuff, but we're going to listen through this track from start to finish and we're going to hear what we think. Get that art up on the screen and let's go, let's do it. What do we got? Get the lyrics up there. Pretty arpeggios on the side. Incredibly dreamy atmosphere at the moment.
I try to be good, am I no good, am I no good, am I no good, with my memory restricted to a Polaroid and evidence.
I mean the lyrics are really trippy, but beautiful melodies though vocally, especially with those overdubs and guitar parts on the sides.
When my mother sees me on the side of a milk carton in Winn-Dixie's dairy, she'll cry and wait up for me. We'll make love in the red night. Euphoric in some strange delight. I'm happier here 'cause he told me I should be loved. You're so handsome when I'm all over you. I'm all over you when I'm all over you. I try to be good, am I no good, am I no good, am I no good, with my memory restricted to a Polaroid and evidence. I just want to be yours, can I be yours, can I be yours, just tell me I'm yours. If I'm turning in your stomach and making you feel sick, you're not making me feel sick.
It's a great build here with the guitarist though, for sure. Great drum fill there. Interesting use of feedback alongside the clean strummed guitars. A bit of the rotary, to be fair. Bit of rotary verb.
Phoned you just to tell you that I made it real far, and that I never blamed you for loving me the way you did while you were torn apart. I would still wait with you there. Don't think about it too hard, you'll never sleep a wink at night again. Don't worry about me and these green eyes, mama, just know that I love you. And I'll see you when you get here.
And that's it. That's the track. That's Strangers from Ethel Cain. And we're going to talk about this track more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an actor named Ethel Cain titled Strangers. Now, I have been provided with the link. In fact, Dinnerhe said, for the lyrics, I suggest you don't think too much about it since it is very, very dark. But if you want the lyrics hit harder, you know, because they do hit hard, the lyrics do. There is a Genius page with what this track is about, and a summary of it, if I understand correctly, is murdered and cannibalized by Isaiah. Ethel says her final goodbye to her mother from beyond the grave. So when they're talking about being all over their mouth, it's visceral, dude. It's brutal and dark, and it's an interesting juxtaposition between a lot of the sweeter elements within this piece and the brutal horror that lies within it. This is, with that in mind, this is sung incredibly well by Ethel. You had the preacher at the start, you know, talking about, God is telling you that there is death for all of us, but then we find that scriptures also tell us that we have a great promise that there is a better place for those who believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. So you kind of, there's a comment on that, and then there is the result maybe of that belief system, the result of kind of following through on that and ending up being cannibalized and murdered, or I don't think that's the intent. It's simply an interesting take on that kind of dynamic within a family. At the very least, they've ended up in a better place, I suppose, through their belief, even with what happened to them. Ethel sings it incredibly well. It's wonderful music. It's so soft and well-spoken and well-sung, and it's palatable, and there's lots of little tails on the melodies there and lovely harmonies with overdubs on the sides. And we managed to coalesce and amalgamate really neatly with a lot of the other textures within the piece as we continue to develop throughout it. And it's always very palatable, and we just show solid head and chest voice all around. So we definitely handle things on the mic. And I think that if the intent is to sort of give that final message to their mom about it, I understand that completely. I mean, it's horrific stuff to discuss within a track, and it's important because that stuff does happen. People do end up going missing on milk cartons. But it's important music, and I think they did very well considering the subject matter. And so you've just got to look at the rest of the track outside of that, you know, the structure of it, the instrumental parts, etc. And I think, again, starting off with that preacher, with the kind of the almost a filter on it, like it's a dream sequence or something like that, or something they're remembering vivid, like a distant memory. You have a track which I think might have verses and choruses there, but it was almost through composed in a sense. It builds in chapters, and it never gets to a point where there's any filler. Things don't feel overdone or repeated. You continue to add instrumental parts as we go through it, and it just crescendos in a way which is a fantastic finish before it fades out at the end of that bell curve with Ethel on their own. There's this incredibly dreamy guitar riff or strummed part there with a wonderful Strymon-esque kind of resonance and reverb, and it's got this other kind of rotary thing going on there, maybe a synth or something like that. Like potentially some reverse takes or something like that, which add an interesting low-end ambience. And we continue to have this bass response with these different guitar takes strummed, sometimes with typically pianissimo, but going up to mezzo pianissimo or mezzo forte, and you kind of add these subtle kicks occasionally. There's these slide guitars that come in, and they're very wistful on top of it, a fantastic bit of color there, and we kind of go up a little bit and kind of come back a little bit, and just we're playing with expectations, but in a way where it always feels like it matches what's being sung. And as we continue to add like snares and like as we go through it, we add more guitar layers, maybe even an organ or something like that at some point. It just starts to develop and blossom. And there's these strings as well on the sides there, which kind of navigate really neatly on left and right hand. And it's just wonderfully fleshed out from a Freaksy's perspective, an instrumental layer standpoint, compositionally there. It never feels like it's too much there. And with subject matter like this, you could have easily have added some really harsh edges and made it really kind of uncomfortable, but they were almost like it was more directed from any more than anything towards the love of their mother. And it was fantastic as we get into the period where the guitar comes in with a sizzle to its lead tone there, some distorted kind of rhythmic parts there. The drum fills come in with the snares and the kicks and the cymbals and everything like that. You finally have the full version of it with everything included. And we go between these verse and chorus sections as we add more and more context to it and learn more about it. But it's very gentle walking you through it, whether it is addressing Isaiah as well as her mother in certain parts there. It just, all of it feels appropriate. And as we come back down after that build up to the finish, it kind of sort of takes away a lot of the heaviness or the kind of like the weight, the viscosity of it. It just ends up being a person with their guitar speaking their final truths before they fade into the ether. And it's incredibly grounding. It anchors you in the environment as presented there. It takes you out of the music a little bit once you finally understand what's going on. I think you can appreciate the sound of this track without knowing the lyrics, but knowing the lyrics and how they juxtapose thematically and expression-wise to what the music is doing is just, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think the way that we kind of loop and like flange or rotary verb the guitars in the end kind of gives it almost like a grungy kind of feel to it there. Like there's a bit of darkness outside of it, or we are going through like a loop or something like that. And I just think that's an interesting take. But ultimately, the way it's written and, you know, composed and performed as well is spectacular. Overall, a phenomenal performance there. All the different guitar takes, synth strings, drum bass, etc. are wonderfully articulated there. When Ethel is direct, you can, you know, hear them neatly alongside it, and I like that the instrumental parts outside of Ethel have enough time to do their thing as well, that there are moments where we have less story and more kind of everything else. But it's simply a track where I feel like even if you were to hear me review it, I think you need to listen to it to be able to get your own kind of spice and interpretation of it. It's a very personable piece there, as opposed to some of the other stuff I've heard, which has been very kind of like confrontational, but I think that the context comes from understanding everything within the album and from start to finish. So it's definitely an album listening through if that's kind of your pixie fancy. Thematically, I think the sweetness of a lot of the major and minor triads without any harsh tendencies, the lack of trying to sort of bash you in the head too much with the lyrical content within the music itself kind of represents almost like an acceptance of how fucked up things are, and like they're just trying to sort of like let their mother know to kind of that they need to move on, everything like that. And it's just incredible, like they've found a place, you know, and it's just a really brutal thing to talk about. But the way it's played, structured, sequenced, and textured insinuates a good balance of those things, at least from a creative perspective. And so I think that we're doing what we need to soften things in a way that makes things more palatable. We can add a little things like the rotary verb and stuff like that, kind of like lets you know there's a little bit of a twist in the tale, there's something a little bit kind of mucked up is going on, and I appreciate that. I think that all the kind of reverb and like soaked layers there and how wistful and dreamy it is, that's more to infer that we're kind of like, it's a sort of a spiritual, otherworldly message from beyond the grave there, but through that representation itself. So I think outside of those things, just with a phenomenal chemistry between the various instruments and a track that is quite well composed and performed, you have the studio production here, which is fantastic. I like the way that you include the sampler to do the start, and then you have Ethel continuing beyond that with her piece, speaking from different perspectives. And the vocals are always clear in the mix. They aren't overproduced, even though they do have compression, EQ, and reverb tails. Still have a bit of delay and stuff in certain components there. Music surrounds you in the stereo field. There's plenty of playing around with different volumes and sub layers and everything like that. You know, things move from left to right there. There's actually an interesting arpeggio that goes on the sides there that I didn't mention, like keys or something like that, electric keys at the start, which is really beautiful. And I feel like that those little bits of attention to detail, making this world to get lost in, are really special. And that's something that works well from a production perspective as well. And there are parts where you can hear Ethel crying out, and they go into unison with the guitar tones, and it's just so well balanced there in terms of the leveling, in terms of niching and stuff within the frequency spectrum, etc. as well. No complaints whatsoever, man. It's just really well handled. And so with that in mind, there's a phenomenal amount of dynamic range. The music doesn't sort of like ever get choked or confused. It's just commercial grade, but it's nice and low without pumping to the bus compression, limiting is handled. And ultimately, I'm blown away by this. Ethel Cain is a really interesting musician, and I'd like to hear more of this stuff in future, so I might go do that in my own time. But thank you very much for watching my review of this track from an act named Ethel Cain, titled Strangers, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SC Patience video. Spiderhands out.